Firstly, it looks like textbooks and curriculums watering down the violent aspects of conflict in order to increase a citizen's perception of the country, in order to increase their unity or their feeling of pride around that country, right? Therefore, we think that to a certain extent, there will be things like patriotism, there will be to a certain extent things like nationalism, and this would most likely be where the accuracy would be lacking, and this would most likely be where opposition today must address the accuracy. But this would also mean that when we have these kinds of textbooks explaining these kinds of conflicts that occurred in historically, right, they would propose both sides of the conflict to show each side's flaws, even if this country in question is the only one who made flaws. Even if this country is the only one who did things like committing genocide, they would probably show the sides of each side's flaws, right? And therefore, we think that until there's a sufficient amount of unity and that some stability is at least resolved within these countries, the schools would continue to prioritize things like unity, like educational curriculums and programs around unity and building unity of these students and the education policies that would continue to be implemented. Two things I want to address in my speech today. Firstly, why status quo is already problematic for these people. But secondly, in these post-conflict states, but also secondly, why we think that an open government, we can provide a better, more stable state for these countries using policies surrounding unification. So what are these post-conflict states often like? We often see that there are very internal civil conflicts as well, meaning there's also division within countries, division among like ethnic groups, religious groups. We think that there's also like bad morale around citizens. There's power grabbing within governments as different types of radical groups try to go. There are also things like corruption, minorities being ignored. There are also radical policies, and there are also this sense of wanting to glorify yourself as the
biased perspective from people from democratic countries with no kind of censorship whatsoever, these people will begin to undergo personal harms and damage. So their own reputation will be harmed. No, thank you. And this also leads down to damage the reputation of the human resources for the country overall, because more and more inaccurate information that these people have will continuously be revealed to the rest of the world with democratic countries. So moving on to the second constructive, which is about the external harms. But before I continue, allow me to characterize what the interests of these post-conflict states are actually going to be. Firstly, apart from my interest in instilling unified feelings within the education system, there are other incentives that concern foreign policies and international affairs. So there are external incentives of these countries, for example, to develop ties with developed countries, to receive a reliable source of resources, and to gain financial aid for a stable economy at the end, especially because these countries are obviously in such a dire state. All teams in today's state agree with this point. So this is why our trade-off is far better and beneficial to the country compared to the government, to both government benches, because we believe that there are several flaws within the systems of teaching within unified values and principles. Firstly, we believe that there are practical limitations to being able to achieve the world that exists on the government bench. All of the open governance cases contingent on the fact that the education system works. Judge, they never explain what this will look like, and it is too good to be true in the first place. Understand that, especially for conflicts that occurred internally, being able to form a society where all the students take time, it requires heavy acceptance from both sides, and therefore it becomes harder for these states to be able to achieve the unrealistic objectives mentioned in the government bench. So I really, at the end of the day, what I want to tell you, Judge, what the main metric again for judging this debate is which side is able to create a realistic world in which the benefits that are obviously too good to be